Good. Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone. If you please join me for the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Sean, you want to establish quorum? Roll call.
Okay, when I read your name, please signify. President Joe Kilren.
Here.
Vice President Donald Wells via the phone. Don, can you? Okay. Secretary Molly Knotts.
Here.
Treasurer Frank Hennigan.
Here.
Director Al Roper. And Director Jason Ward.
Here.
And then be it shown that Director Marilyn Stout is absent. She's got a council meeting tonight.
Okay, we have 6 out of 7, so the meeting's called to order. We're going to defer any approval of minutes of the June 21st until the June 21st meeting. Just a few introductory comments. First of all, thank you all for a good turnout. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank our neighbor from Royalty, has representative here tonight, Debbie. If you wouldn't mind just standing a minute. Cape Royal, geez, sorry. If you did anything wrong, you might as well get the name, right? But we've been working in close contact and coordination for about a week now. It's too bad it hadn't been longer, but it's been about the last week, and we thank them for their help and concern. Obviously, between our property and theirs, we have a real shared interest in what happens with that adjacent parcel. And, you know, no matter how you might feel about it, no one likes to see what looks to be nice land being developed, unless you're the owner and you're into the development, going to make a lot of money on it. But we have certainly a joint interest in how that's done, and the devil's in the details. And the primary reason for tonight's meeting is to really try and get as much understanding of what might be occurring out there, so everyone's dealing with the same type of information, and then come to some kind of reasonable conclusion as to the approach we would be taking in Wednesday's public hearing, and any implications on that approach into the future. So recognizing devil's in the details, we're going to just a couple things about housekeeping. It's being live streamed on Channel 1. We have a resident comment section just on this topic for the meeting. And if you would, if there are additional, or if there are items that are similar to or same than what someone else has mentioned, because I think we have a lot of similar thoughts on this, just quickly acknowledge that so that we don't spend a lot of time on the same kind of thoughts, okay? I just want to emphasize and let you know that it's very important that we have a lot of community and resident interest in the process, and we need to demonstrate that outwardly in a lot of ways, and to the extent that that can be coordinated and probably done with some direction, it will be more helpful. But in any event, it's very good. We're going to need that throughout the process, because no matter what the outcome is, it's best that that interest will be able to help influence any parts of the process that are political. And there are political animals out there. This is going to go before the council, and that's a political body. And no matter what you might be sensitive to, certainly resident voter interest shakes the process a little bit. So I encourage the continued interest, and I think it's all in our best interest throughout the community, because it's going to affect all the properties. Again, we're going to organize the meeting such that we talk process first, so everyone understands what the process is. And then we have the opportunity, we being Sean and I, and a resident here who is into graphics and happens to live with probably the best vantage point of anyone as to that property line, or one of the best, was with us today. We visited the Urban Engineering Development Company, who is working with the developer and owner to get it through up until the approval process. They have also done some preliminary work on designs in past years. I found out some things today about how old the design potential for that property has been. This company's been working on it almost since year 2000, and with 3 previous owners, so this is the 4th owner he's worked with. Just a couple things about that. The current, and I won't get into all the details, I'm just going to try and give you a very quick summary here so you can think about things as we're going through the details and focus on them. A couple things, the property up until 2007 was actually zoned mixed family, multifamily, and that designation no longer exists. But in 2007, the city developed its long-term development plan, and when that occurred, they put the new land use designation on it, and the non-use designation they applied was multiple use preserve. Now, preserve doesn't mean reserve or preserve for animals or anything like that. What that means is they're holding it at that particular level, and primarily with respect to the utilities, and that it moves the next step on that process. It's now reserved for future use, but the next step would be they would transition that to it's likely going to use it, and they're going to be looking at moving utilities into that area. So that's where that nomenclature is important, because I think a lot of people have seen that name out there are relating it to animals and preserving fauna and flora and that kind of thing. It's totally a different ballgame. There are 2 steps in the process. The process involves the land use change, which is done by this planning and zoning based on their recommendation to the city council. The city council then makes a decision. If the city council approves it, it then goes to the state immediately after that. And basically, the state takes a period of time to do that, but it's pretty much rubber stamped by the state at that point. Parallel to that, likely parallel to that, would then, once that's approved, and they would be developing what is called a project development plan. And basically, that's when the details of how many homes and all get approved, and the zoning and all gets approved. So there's 2 steps in the process, and the one step, the land use step, has 2 parts. It has the city part and it has the state part. And then if they want to be a little bit risque, they might even get into some basic design once it's approved on the land use piece, because that means it's going forward, provided that they don't hit into any stumbling blocks along the way. If you can correct me, or anyone, Sean or Debbie, if I misspeak on any of these things, please correct me and pull me back in. But that's generally the way the process is. I think as you're evaluating what you're hearing tonight, it's very important to try and almost take a pragmatic approach on this. The city's land use plan very much is very aggressive on looking for large commercial tracts and large multifamily tracts. So this is in the city's interest to develop areas like this. There aren't too many of these around, but it's in their interest to do that. There's a propensity there, therefore, for them to seek approval on these kind of things. Again, I'm not trying to I'm trying to be pragmatic and relate to you the conditions we face. The alternative of this land use amendment not being passed would be it would revert to the commercial. So you have to weigh what would be a more visual, pleasing generation of that property. Would it be a residential in which we might be able to influence buffer zones and lines of sight and that kind of thing, or a commercial in which we might have, a large building out there, a box store or something like that? And that's not unfeasible for that. They actually were involved in this process early on. They had conceptual drawings with a hotel and a lot of commercial frontage on that site. The company we met with was Insight, who is the urban planning company, not the developer. The developer is MSI. We saw some pictures of MSI's properties. They're very attractive properties. They're pretty high-end scale. They do Massachusetts. They have some in Jersey, South Carolina, other places, and some of the photos we saw are pretty high-end. That's probably all the general stuff that I'd like to cover at this time. Sean, you want to talk through the process a little bit?
Okay, picking up on a little bit what Joe said, is the meeting Wednesday is not the zoning meeting. This is for the land use, which is the definition of how that land is used. Right now it can be developed as a commercial property. So Plan B is if this thing does not go forward, that's a potential. As it proceeds through the city, you're going to have it go to the state, and at the same time it's in the state, it's probably going to parallel the time frame that's happening in the city. In the city, what they do with projects this large is it enters what's called the PDP process. Sandoval went through that same process, which is the Plan Development Project. What the Plan Development Project is they look at really all aspects of it. So a lot of the things I think we're going to have concerns about for the meeting Wednesday are not going to be the type of things that are going to be addressed in the simple land use, because it's changing that. It's going to be more involved in that process. When you get into the PDP, you look at the general site plan approval, the rezoning, the variances, the plats, and that's really the time where we focus more on the environmental, the density, the drainage, and the overall project. The first thing I would say is for this company really to even meet with us, they had no obligation to do that. A lot of companies that they're developing, they're not going to meet with potential people that might offer conflict. So I do have some respect for them that they sat down and worked with us. The person that we sat down with, Brian, actually worked for another developer that developed Sandoval called Bonita Bay Group. So he did some work in here as well in the Somerville area. The initial thing which we'll pull up on the board is, I think one of the concerns is over density, which again they're going to get into when they get into the process. So anything right now is the initial. But when we looked at the units today, you're looking at some that are called land units and some that are called water units, where they're actually built cantilevered over top of their lakes. And it was sort of a neat design when you see how it's done. They're trying to utilize the space there. His potential, which we looked today, was under 400 units. I think that was one of the big concerns when we look at overall on the potential of the project. One of the things to point out is this is not the initial stage. When you look at like a developer and you have an idea on how we can approach this, this thing has been going on since what?
Well, actually, a little bit before 2006.
2000, yeah. So we got when you saw what they presented today, some of the things like the environmental have been done. They've already done the study on all that to look at the species, the wood storks, things like that. They've done the bathymetric testing. They're already starting to deal with some of the vendors with honk on some of the cantilever designs. They've dealt with lead transportation. One of the questions that we had was, is it going to require an additional light out there on veterans? And it does not look like that will happen, but that's obviously something for the future. One of the big questions we had was on drainage too, that was one of the big impacts that we're concerned with the flooding last year, and if this is going to be something that comes into the Sandoval system. Well, their design actually goes west, which doesn't impact us. Overall, just so that you understand the process, it's Wednesday's meeting will be with the planning and zoning. They do have the current recommendation from Chad, their city planner. I spoke with him at length for probably about a half hour, and I think some of our residents have talked to him too. But he gave me a lot of information on it. He's going to recommend to city planning that they put this forward with council. And then when we get into that a little bit further, I think more specifically, some of the things that we're concerned about will be addressed.
Yeah, and just basically, you pretty much there. Just basically, some of the key points again are the building density, making sure that when they tell us that they're conceptually looking at less than 400 units, that they get locked into that somewhere along the process, or to the extent we can lock them into that. The buffer zones, that buffering is done well. That the drainage, I think is a concern, but it's going to be managed by the county, the water management people, and they're very meticulous in their process. So I'm less concerned about that, but it is a real issue if it's not done correctly. So we have to be on top of that with them. The traffic count is probably less of an issue, but if they continue with that density, but that we need to have that out there. I think one of the uses of the use of the property is another issue that we want to understand better too. It's undetermined right now as to whether they're going to go for rentals or ownership or a mix of the two. So they were thinking about any design that they put forward had probably done such that it could become either a condominium or a rental, long-term rental, which means that the property lines would be down the interior walls of the property, just like they do in condominiums. The phasing of the project is important, and we wouldn't want to have someone get in there who, only does part of the site development, puts in a few homes, and then the project goes belly up, and we're sitting with an undeveloped property out there in contention for a lot of years with a lot of crap hanging around. So you want to look to see if you can help influence that part of the process where they do all of the site development work. It might be a fantasy or of the imagination here that we might be able to influence them having to do a completion bond. That might kill the project, but certainly that's worth trying to lobby for. That if something goes bad with it, that they'd be insured against, they'd be bonded against that. That's probably about it in a nutshell from the laundry list of things. Best thing.
You want me to put up the...
Yeah, why don't you just go through that too?
Okay, just take a second to come on. For the board members, real quick, each of you have one of these. Make sure your names are spelled correctly. These are for the, we're going to get name plaques. This was recommended by one of the homeowners. That's actually a good idea versus these.
Well, if they're spelled incorrectly, we'll just fire the general manager.
Okay. All right, for definition, there's this parcel right here, what is it,
84.47.
84.47 is the parcel that we are talking about. They also own the large parcel on the other side of the road, which I believe is about 80 acres. One of the questions that we had that was posed to their city planner was, is this part of the deal too? And it doesn't look like right now it is. It looks like there's certain things over here that would make that more prohibitive.
Yeah, one of the things is the availability of nearby utilities, the sewer and the water, and it's very difficult to get across veterans. They're adjacent. Those areas are adjacent right now because of us and Cape Royal. I got it right, Debbie, right next to us. So.
Sean,
Yeah.
is it possible for you, I mean, we're talking to a lot of people.
Can I move off to the side? Yeah, let me actually move this out of the way right now. All right, can all of you see now? Except for you. Okay. When you're looking at this thing, one of the questions was these lakes, how deep they are. These lakes are about 20 feet deep is what they're telling us. So this thing doesn't have the potential to fill the lakes. When we looked today, we looked at how they're going to do the perimeter condos coming down the center, some around the outside, where these things are actually cantilevered over the water, so that they're actually over the water more than the land. And I think the total was it 350?
354 is the total units that they conceptually. Again, the conceptual plan is not something that's locked in stone, so that's something we have to be careful about, because you get sold a bill of goods up front and it kind of turns out a lot differently. They were on stilts, and just give you an idea how they do that. They're going to pile drive those stilts, but the point being is that they have to reinforce a lot of the shoreline to do that. They may have to come in and put some metal, almost like a seawall construction, somewhere into that lake area, so that you're able to control the creep on it. So, and that's, Hahn could be doing that kind of work, it's all seawater work.
We looked at, they had 3 potential ingresses, egress, one right here that came into this area, one that came in right here down the center, and the third which came down here in the southern part. The concern over here was, I think the people thought originally these things were going to jet out into our water, and that obviously can't happen. They have created sort of a buffer here, which was nice to see, where these units are actually about right here, and they're buffered. And again, all of this, this isn't what they're going over on Wednesday. These are just some of the design considerations when they get to the PDP process. Wednesday is just for the general, the use to allow the multi-family.
They're buffered with what, excuse me? How are they buffered?
With the actual land, instead of going right up to the lot line. For example, like we saw the one of his original designs, which was for the previous owner, and it actually had almost like a wall of condos there. This design is a lot more friendly, where it actually starts over here, where it's not going right into our property. Questions was, we own this land, which is prospectively could be used as an additional buffer. That land gets really wet in the summer, but that is ours, and as is all of this right here that you see in this whole area right here.
What about up in that other corner?
Up in the other corner, this area is where they had overhangs going into this perspective area right here. They actually own right up there almost half of that lake, which borders Sunvale. So they had units in here.
And what about the lower right along Somerville? What's the plan for that area going out better?
The entrance was down here, but they actually had a nice buffer on Somerville that it showed on there, on everything.
Will they have to clear cut all of the Australian pines and level that?
They'll be taking out all of the invasive
Species, yeah, that is Australian pine, of which that is well populated with lots of Australian pine. All of the others, he had a list of about 7 or 8 that they identified in there they'll be pulling out. So that's going to get, a lot of plants taken out of there and trees.
One more question. How many units are there per unit?
They were varied. Some of them, it was, I think, 4, 6, and 8.
So how many total doors are they talking about?
The 354.
350.
Units. How many doors?
Oh, you mean residents?
Right.
Well, that's
They don't know. And by the way, all the numbers we're telling you right now, that's speculative. That they put together a development plan. They don't even have that contract yet. Their contract right now just gets you through the planning and zoning. If they get engaged, and if I were the builder and developer, these guys have experience in it, if they could come to terms on it, I certainly would like to use them, because they really have everything ready to roll. And their concepts seem to be pretty good. But that can change. So that's why it's important that whatever happens, we get in a point where we're able to at least exert some influence on being able to keep those things structured.
Really, the PDP, just let me expand on that again.
Talking?
What?
Should have signed up.
Okay, hold on a second, Jim. The PDP process, when you get into the plan development, that's really when you get into more of the specs like this, and where we have a voice as a neighbor, as does Royalty, that you're gonna have influence as to how this thing actually comes together. The area in Royalty, which is on the north side up here, is probably the closest. You guys are the closest to the development that has the most impact on it. But I think that they were talking about some berms up there.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have a record, or can we find out who owned this property from, I presume this place was built in 2006, right,
Mhm.
2007? I'm living here 25 years, I live in the Southwest. I recently purchased a unit in Milford. In my experience in the 25 years here, the city does what they want to do when they want to do it. I would like to know, if we can find out who bought or who owned this property back then, and then who it was transferred to down the line.
Well, that's easy to find. You can go on LIPA and find that very easy, but it was
That's
under.
pretty important, because I know that,
Yeah.
you wake up in the morning and you have a gas station on your corner, or a 7-Eleven, or a dollar store.
Well, that's the.
They're just doing whatever they want.
It's zoned commercial right now, which means that if it's not granted, then that is their option, is to keep it commercial.
Thank you.
Mhm.
In the information, it said the site would allow a maximum of 1,351 dwelling units. That's a lot more than what you're talking about with
Yeah.
400.
Do you want to?
Yeah, that's basically that this new land use is based on a state. The state has identified every inch of property in Florida, and they characterize it by these different land use requirements. Then they take those land use requirements, and there's different classes, and those classes then dictate what type of dwellings and that type of density that can be put on it, and then zoning comes back and does another on that. In particular, this land use is 16. It's just the category they put it into. In order to get that 1351, if you do the math, it's 84.5 times that number, 16. And that's how they get that. They're already allowed 74, so you might be seeing a change. 1351 plus 74 is the total they can do on this, I think. But you got to start thinking about return on investment. That guy would have to come back and fill in 25 feet of water, and in order to do that, you could never do that, because you got to be able to contain the runoff from that into the water management system. So all of that is a calculus you do. They couldn't even approach that number. That's just an assumption. That is just a calculation. It has significance in that if you start doing traffic counts and all that stuff, and they actually push it to its max based on those calculations, that it's significant, but it caps it. So
I think it's a good question, though, because there's a big difference when you're talking, almost 1,400 units versus 300 and change. So.
yeah. I guess Sean, if we maybe just general feelings about what we heard today as compared to what we were believed was going to happen. I was favorably impressed with what they did today. They certainly were very knowledgeable. They had a good history on the property. They seemed extremely sophisticated in their approach, and isn't their first pony ride. These guys have been through it a few times before. The key, I think, to it is, well, let's recognize the things that we can control, and those that we can't control, let's recognize that too, but let's try and provide influence in those things that we're able to. And the choice, I think, It's very important, and I'm going to emphasize this, for us to continue to show strong interest, strong support, and strong resident and owner participation in the process, because that gives us strength in whatever happens with this property, to the extent to be able to influence the process. And council is political, so recognize that, and even in the process development project part of this, it's very important that we have that support to be able to help influence when we get down to the details.
I think, go ahead.
Would the zoning also allow for some boating on those lakes? Those are pretty big lakes.
They're not going to have motorized boating. He made that clear on it, and but it could possibly have kayaks on there.
But Dave, again, that's another thing. The guy told us that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
When we get to the PDP,
That's when it's.
that's when you got to put the stamp on. Yeah. Yeah.
We had that. Yeah, good question. Any other questions back here?
Sean, just a couple comments. First and foremost, Scott DeFilippis on Stony Hill. I'd just like to commend you and the board for having a meeting at 6:30. It's greatly appreciated that it's at a time where most residents can attend, and we can see today there is a great attendance there, so thank you for that. Just a quick history. I have 20 plus years in politics up north, and the majority of them were on the environmental side. So when I first saw the parcel going up, my first call was to Brian Hammond, our Lee County Commissioner, and told him that this parcel and the parcel that they own across the street would be great for a 2020 land acquisition, because it's a contiguous piece on the left of Veterans that would just dovetail what we already own as a county, and then we could come right across the street and do that. So he's been apprised of this. He's written back to me. He's going to put it before the 2020 group, see if it does make sense to them. Again, like the gentleman back there said, he's been in the Cape 25 years, and he's absolutely right. This project is going to go through. Thank God it's probably not going to be a gas station or a dollar store, but our city does not have the vision that I think it should have, and that's where I think we need to come in as a collective group between our development and Cape Royal, and at least get maybe one person, representative of both developments, when you guys meet with these people, also to meet with them, to kind of be the eyes and ears. Not that there's any distrust, but again, I had 20 plus years in politics, and on the environmental side, our city of 13 square miles conserved about 15,000 acres towards preservation. So what we really need to do here, though, in my opinion, for what it's worth, is like our chairman said, when the PDP comes through is really when the rubber meets the road. And probably the greatest ecological disaster that ever hit Cape Coral was when Cape Coral was made, what we did. And they're still continuing that with clear cutting, and as somebody said too, we're going to get rid of the Australian pines and the Brazilian peppers, but I've walked this site and I know there are trees there that really should stay. So what we need to do collectively is put our mind together and say, okay, really, what are some things? And I came up in my mind, we need to identify trees over 6-inch caliber and have those preserved as long as they are not in an area where development is going. Secondly would be to absolutely decrease the possible height from, I think, a max of 38 to maybe mirror what we have in Somerville, because, they say, it meets the code, but there's nothing 3 stories until you hit Burnt Store Marina, Brownsville, Texas, North Fort Myers, and Cape Harbor. So it really doesn't fit in this area. So I think if we identify that we need to preserve existing trees, minimize the height, minimize the density, and come up with a list that we collectively as 2 neighbors want to see happen here, that would be our springboard. And if we stick with that, I think we have a better chance of dictating, or at least coming to the table with some ideas that they might be amenable to. And also, I would highly recommend, in my years in politics, as I said before, if we collectively as a group between both developments physically write each one of your council members. Don't do an email blast to them all. They like to see something. I think Rob Zivkovic put something out there. If you personalize it and everybody gets out there, it has a little bit more credence to it. And the same thing if we want to follow up with our county commissioners on this. So if we do a blast and just say, hey, we're concerned citizens, not that we're pro or against development, because again, I'm telling you, I've spoken to people at the city, and they say this is going through. So we need to be at the table and dictating what we really want to see there.
Yeah, Scott, thank you. Let me just raise a point of order here, too. We got off, and thank you very much to all value, and that's exactly what we're talking about, getting involved in PDP up to our eyeballs in it. So, but let's go back to the point of order of the meeting. Let's just go ahead down to calling the sign-up list, Sean, because in all fairness to people who signed up, we should be doing it that way. And then we'll open it up to some questions a little bit later, too.
Okay, we have Mrs. Pogge from Somerville. No? Okay.
I thought that was an attendee.
Oh, she signed up for the coffee.
Please note for the meeting minutes that Mrs. Pogge has attended. Okay. Mrs. Burgess?
Okay, I'm calm now, but it's like 300 and change.
Okay.
That's my issue.
Scott,
Thank you.
okay. And Ken Dennis from Blackburn?
I attended also.
Okay, all right. And Robert Bixler from Somerville.
I thought that was a
All right, that was very...
Scott, I share 40 years of very similar activity, but I was on the other side of the fence putting in chemical and refineries. So, I know the other arguments well.
I think it's a good point, though, the fact that if you're going to have varied opinions and this thing becomes abrasive, you're really going to have no power to how this thing rolls. If you have one unified voice and you project that forward, we have it, which we can combine forces with our neighbors, then the fact is we're going to have a lot more power in this as to what happens.
Yeah, one of the creative suggestions that Debbie had today was that they all wear orange shirts to the meeting on Wednesday, to the public hearing.
Well, I think we
you want to suggest?
I think we should too. I think we should show that somehow we're unified.
Something that isn't home, we all orange.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Debbie Davidson. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association for Cape Royal. We've been watching this property. We actually have a person who knows the new owner and has been in contact with him for a little while. So we knew that this was coming, but again, without any kind of idea of what it was going to look like, just that there was plans for developing. I think what's really important right now in the approach that we're taking is that this land use is actually to our benefit. Like I said, this is much better than us waking up with,
Walmart.
Yeah, an auto parts. We really need another auto parts place, something like that. So our belief is that from a traffic standpoint, a visual standpoint, et cetera, this land use change. So we don't want to get them too excited about a lot of people showing up and kind of talking about a lot of things that aren't appropriate for land use. What we're doing is, we had our Cape Royal Foundation, which provides golf scholarships to some local high school students. We just had our foundation golf tournament, and orange was this year's color. I don't know who voted that, but orange was this year's color, so we just had a whole bunch of those out. So we just have asked our folks, wear your foundation shirts or orange shirts or something that says Cape Royal on it, whatever. So whatever you guys want to do. Our plan is we have engaged our attorneys, just so that we've got a voice that is very logical, very, laid out, very succinctly represents what we want to say at this particular meeting. Because we don't want them to think that we're, against something that we don't really understand. We want to make sure they know that we do understand what this is. And then we're going to list our concerns for the upcoming zoning activities so that they understand that we intend to participate, we intend to, be part of this process. As we mentioned, Brian from the Insight Company was very cordial today. He said, yes, we'll be sharing all of that information with you guys. He said, we don't want, and nor does the owner want, to have a big contentious. That just holds things up, costs money for everybody. So if we can work together on the issues of buffering, visual impact, sound impact, drainage, wildlife, traffic, all of those things, if they'll, work with us on that. They already talked about things like berms and fences. They've talked about working with us, you know, they do some things on their side, we do some things on our side. You know, so at this point, we're in a very cooperative mode, we'd like to see that continue. Obviously, you know, between the two neighborhoods, we're gonna be very diligent to make sure that we're watching and making sure they follow through on all those things. Because as we all know, sometimes those things get started, and even if they have well-meaning to begin with, things change. So it is gonna take us paying attention. I will say from a Cape Coral standpoint, we've got a neighborhood who's really good at that, and I think you probably do too. So we look forward to working with you and to making sure that what comes out of this is, if it's as pretty as what we saw today, we've got the option of having a really nice set of neighbors next door.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Debbie. So who's gonna pick the color of the shirt?
Just real quick, I appreciate what you said, and unfortunately for us, we've had a week to become, you know, to know this is going to be happening. So I think for a lot of us, we are still reactionary, we're still in shock, we had no idea that this was. So there's a lot of emotions on the Sandoval side that you all probably kind of already worked through. So your calmness and your logic will make maybe good for us to be able to kind of absorb some of that a little bit. And I do appreciate that. That's the unfortunate part, is that we've had a week to, and I live in Somerville. I look out at the lake, and so that there is nothing that view that I want to lose. But I agree that having homes go in versus a gas station or the back of Walmart would definitely be a better option. So it's good to hear what we've heard tonight, and knowing that it's been in the works, and I don't want to say that it's hopeless. We're not going to stop it, but that we can affect what's going to happen and what we may be seeing. That's kind of good to know. You feel like you have a little bit?
Yeah. Well, and I think, eventually, we've got houses that are right up against where your houses are gonna be. And so obviously we're very concerned because it is almost all straight lines. There are some homes that are gonna have to be preserved, a couple of weird little plants that are part of the, ones you can't cut down kind of stuff. So they're gonna have to deal with all of that. But, we've already put into our 2019-20 forecast for a landscape committee to plant fishtail palms along that area, so that we can go ahead and get them in, so by the time those are actually there, they've actually had a chance to stand. So we're already starting to plan for our side, but because we have a certain responsibility, even if they put a fence or whatever, we've got a certain responsibility, so we're already looking at that kind of thing.
Sean, can I ask you something?
Yes.
I actually went to the meeting today, just so you know, I was wanting to contact, I'm not saying to blow my own horn, I'm telling you my side of the story today, if that's okay with you guys. Just that I try to show, what was your name is this?
Gina?
Gina, yeah. I'm really upset about it too. My wife and I have been crying for a while about this. I live right on that lake, right at Fairmont, I'm square to that lake.
Back your house.
My friend Robert, he's my neighbor, he just moved in a few weeks ago. Literally we walked last year. I support what the Joe and Sean are saying, but the problem is we can't win this fight directly. And so what I did, I called Brian inside, and initially I was almost wanted to be verbally abusive to him because he's the enemy. I spent an hour, he spent an hour and 20 minutes on the phone with me. That's what got the meeting going. And he could have hung up on me straight away. But the more we talked, the more we went through it, and I just said, well, I never give in to you. I just said we're going to fight you 100%. But let me have a seat at the table and find out. But today, there was a lot of logical comments on drainage and hurricane evacuation and schools, and it was all very good, like you said. For me, it's just an emotional issue. And I don't give a crap about the numbers. It's just that we bought the house, this incredible view. It's my dream house. And I'm happy that every day I wake up on that lake view, and I look out and I just see these trees. I don't know what trees they are, they're just trees, and they're trees or whatever trees, but, you know, the guys tell me that like 80% are exotic, and they've got to come out by the state statute, and, you know, so in the meeting today, I said exactly what you said. You know, they went around the table, they talked logically, and you know, Joe is very, very, very knowledgeable, and actually there was a gentleman,
Yes,
Royalty, wow, he knows his stuff. So they did a great meeting, and Brian was very cordial. I mean, he could have an office, and he was trying to work with us. So there was a positive meeting. The design is a very unusual thing for me, because I don't want this to happen. If I had the power, I would just make that disappear, but we don't. So I looked at the design, and it wasn't sold.
You can tell it's British, huh?
You know, actually, Sean get a cat out of the bag. His first reaction was, "Oh wow!"
You know, Richard, you and Rob's worst choice was picking the neighborhood you're in and the neighbor you have. Those two guys are my next door neighbors.
Actually, it is. Robert, Joe, and I were all together. You know, but the thing is, I'll be honest. I mean, I bought a house in Leeds, and Brian said today, he said, you know, there isn't many guys with a 400-foot lake view. There's no answer to the show. It took a year to find the house. And like you said, it's an emotional journey. Robert, who bought the house, knew it was private land, they maybe get developed. I was told, and a lot of you have been told this, and I keep hearing this, that unfortunately I'm pretty good friends with my realtor. But if I could take her to court for this, I'd take her to court. Because she told me, you know, there was a wildlife preserve, you know, protect the land, you know, I know that is wrong. I know that is wrong.
No, Richard, I'm gonna rat you out, because you actually said that there are lions and tigers.
Just to try to not, you know, cut my wrist too much. The week we bought the house, my house was on Wind News. Before we went to signing documents, my house was on Wind News with a bear. That's my house. So we went to the signing thing with the bear running around and poo all over on it. So anyway, you know who I am. So the point is, I made the comment to Brian, the reason I'm saying is I will try to be involved from a homeless point of view and put the emotions. I mean, I want to be logical about this, and again, I'd rather have a nice looking set of units than a Best Buy or Walmart or whatever. So I think let's try to work with them, not against them, and they were accepted. But at the end of the day, it's going to take me a while to accept this isn't even going to go away. And that's just want to say. There.
You got in the back? Charlie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for those of you that met with Brian today, not that anything can be written in stone, I understand that, but gut reaction, we're talking about their investment in the land itself, cantilevering units over a lake.
Actually, built on stilts, Charlie. Built on stilts.
Some of the things that we're talking about are expensive construction demands. Is it practical to expect this to be moderate income housing? No. Or affordable income housing?
No.
As it's being built
Excellent question, Charlie, because if you think about the level of investment that's required and the return on investment to be able to support that, they have to be high-end.
How about a gut feeling of whether or not, for those of you that are in the room or have experience with this, when you invest that amount of money, is the return on investment better with owner-occupied units or rental units?
It all depends on the demographics, Charlie. It all depends what area you're
It would
in.
be better off with a neighbor who has skin in the game and only.
Absolutely.
Versus, we have no influence over that.
Yeah, the only basis to comment on that with understanding some of the history of this developer is he keeps his properties and likes rentals. I don't know that's a fact, but we were told that today by this person.
If it were rented with this kind of investment, they might be some serious rental numbers that are placed on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to answer your question with the new tax legislation that just came out. You're not going to be able to write off your mortgage interest as much as you were able to. So a lot of these people that are going to be buying these homes are probably going to be cash buyers, or they're going to be such high end that they're the ones that are going to benefit by borrowing money. So I think you need to probably relax on that. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be a $500,000 home and somebody buys it with 2% down and they're trying to borrow the rest of the money. I think those days are gone. So,
Yeah, if they sell them as homes versus rental.
right.
What's kind of the time frame? I know we have this meeting Wednesday. When does PDP?
No,
Weeks, months, years?
let me try and give you a feel for that. I don't know perfectly what it is, but let me give you an approximation from just perspective on things. The council's on hiatus from June 19th till, when is it, Jim? July 22nd or something? Okay, so they're gone. This won't even get before council till August at the earliest. Pardon me?
Earliest August.
Earliest will be August, possible, probably September. I don't know that for a fact, but one of those 2 months. It then goes to the state, and the state's process can be a couple months. The PDP, they can wait and not pursue the PDP, or they can roll the dice a little bit and start doing the PDP, assuming everything's going to come back copacetic. If that's the case, they'll move forward with the PDP. PDP could be 5, 6, 7, 8 months. So you're talking, at best, groundbreaking, maybe early July, August, something next year, something like that. That would be the most compressed time frame I could see. So that'd give you a feel for it. Yeah, Jim?
The PDP is the most important thing for us.
Absolutely.
If you take 200 people to council meeting on the PDP, we're gonna win a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
Everything, no, but a lot we will win. I've been here 22 years, and I've seen developers lose a lot, and had to make a lot of variance.
Yeah, and Scott brought that out too. That's our leverage point. That's the Achilles heel we go after, and we do it in a reasonable, we do it in a sophisticated business-like manner. We be very logical in approach, be not abusive in the manner in which we present it, and we do it in a way that makes good business sense. And that's the way I think we can really influence things to the greatest extent to get the win-win that we're looking for here. So. Okay, any more questions out there? Okay, board, let's just talk about Wednesday a little bit. We're going to be making a presentation, a comment at the meeting, the public meeting, probably from a position standpoint, basically, very similar to what Debbie had reflected, and what we kind of, I think, discussed here. What I'm hearing is that it's really a fait accompli almost, but not recognizing that there's not a way to influence the process going forward. We're not going to be resistant, and we'll be supportive of development, provided that we have certain concerns, and those concerns can be managed properly and handled through the later phases of the process in zoning. I would propose that as kind of like a position that we should take at that meeting from an association standpoint. Okay, they got a motion to proceed that way? They got a second? Second, discussion? We thought you were asleep, Don. How you doing, buddy? Okay, no further discussion. So let's proceed that way. It looks like we take a vote on this. All those in favor of proceeding in that manner? Looks like we got it. Don, you in favor? Okay, all right, we got a unanimous on it, so, Deb, what we'll do, if you don't mind sharing yours, and we'll come up with something, share ours, great, okay.
Do you want our residents to wear a colored shirt? I think it's actually
I
good.
think it's a good idea. I'm not picking a color. My wife redresses me every time I try to go out.
What color are we gonna pick?
Well, our colors are blue or yellow, and the Sandoval logo.
All right, so what, like a yellow or blue?
You could just dress pineapple.
We need you all to dress as pineapples for the...
Yeah, yellow.
Okay, royalty, all right, calm down, people, this is exciting. We're gonna wear yellow, anybody that comes to the meeting, so that we can show a unified, front. So Sandoval is represented by the yellow.
You can wear a different color shirt with a yellow tag. All right, any other further discussion tonight?
Sure, maybe mention that the meeting may be slightly online.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
good point, Richard.
One of the questions we had was there's, I think, 3 things prior to us. It's gonna start at 9. It could end up that where this thing is until about lunchtime, from what they were saying, or afterwards. So if you are going, sometimes they fly through things on the zoning where it's done each thing in a half hour, but sometimes it's extended. He might have been telling us that, so we don't have our people show up, could have been the approach, but.
Yeah, our recommendation, what we're gonna tell our folks is for everybody to show up at 9, because the point is making the impression. If everybody shows up at 9, and then, I mean, you know, some people are gonna I'm gonna have to leave if it goes to 1 o'clock, I'm gonna have to leave at some point, because I work during the day as well, so, you know, if you have to leave, but if we can get everybody there at 9, then they'll see the sea of us, and we'll take a count, I guess you'll take a count too, so that when our speakers get up, we can say, you know, we had X number of neighbors here today, you know, represented, so in case you do have to leave by the time that we go.
How many people know it? Just go pound it, please.
Yeah, does everyone know where the public hearing is held? It's council chamber, right? Okay. All right.
Joe?
City Hall.
Crazy statement, I really like yellow, but maybe, I don't know if you want the 2 groups divided or not, or maybe everybody should wear orange so that they can see how many people are affected.
Sure.
Yellow or orange?
Joe, I think we should have, Sean put out through eyes and ears that we would like to have community support at this meeting on Wednesday.
Good point, Molly. We'll emphasize, everyone's in agreement with that, right? We'll do a consensus email on this to generate support and continue to do it this way. Okay, good.
I don't know if I own
Another
a
thing
yellow
you might
shirt.
want to consider is carpooling, because the parking is limited. So if you are able to go with other residents who can stay for the full amount of time, or who have a set time that they have to leave, at least you would not be taking up as many spaces for cars. Because if as many people from each community want to be there, the parking will be impossible to obtain. And then you'll get discouraged, you'll turn away. The more people one sees in yellow and in orange, the more effective we will become. And it might even be to the point where not all of us will fit in that chamber room, and that does make a much larger statement altogether.
Yeah, Ms. Muncy, thank you. I can finally find a place where orange works. I'm going for years with that hat. Any more? Yep, in the back, Charlie?
Yeah, just curious. I'm all for attending. It was one of my initial reactions to when I found out about this, that it's important to attend. But to what are we going to affect with this attendance?
Well, I think that, you know, again, there'll be people who will be communicating with councilmen at this meeting this part of the process is less affected by the political element, but when the council has it in front of it, they're gonna realize that there's votes out there. And, you know, between the two of us, you know, we probably have, what, 4,500 residents here? And you guys probably,
We're not in Cape Coral.
okay.
We're not a voting element.
Okay,
From that perspective.
okay. Well, we will let them think that. But Charlie, that's where it's at. It's the political stuff that really is I think we're trying to put. And seriously, I was kidding with Scott before, but I've been in some pretty heavy-duty meetings with Texans and other Louisiana people and Chicago people. There is an influence at these meetings, and it carries through. And I would have to have an excellent case without any flaws at all in it to be able to prevail if there's a long resident or a strong resident vote position out there. It really does help. And it's so overwhelming how many 200 people can make in a meeting. That's a large group of people. So,
Hey, Joe?
yeah.
Maybe we should all wear orange, because now she's right. I mean, they need to separate the orange from the non-voting. They need to spread, anybody in orange don't matter, they If we all wear the wrong color, they can't tell us apart, they can't split.
What a deliberative process. It took an hour to figure out the color. We've done everything else. Okay, getting just back to the point of order of the meeting. We're not going to have an executive session. There's no business for executive session today. You got a motion to adjourn? Got a second? All those in favor of adjourn? So adjourn.
You can go.